Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. It's a pleasure of mine to have back on the show George Tavares. I had the pleasure of interviewing him, when was it? 2 and a bit years ago, when you were running for mayor of Mississauga the first time. And you're now running for mayor again because there's a by-election going on in Mississauga. And George is one of those candidates that's not currently on council, which is a little bit different than four other candidates that are currently on council. And he's got a lot of really quite interesting ideas. So I thought it'd be great to check in with him and see why he thinks he could make a good mayor, what his background is, and what some of the big policies are. So George Tavares, welcome to the show, sir.
Hi, thanks for having me back. Yeah, ran in 2022 and obviously didn't win, but I did learn a lot about the city of Mississauga and some of the issues and what it does and doesn't do well. So one of the things that they do well, they're bright. The council are brilliant. They know what they're doing. They know how to work, but they seem to be limited in their understanding or their abilities to change. They seem to handcuff themselves. And one of the issues that we talked about during the last interview was the lack of vision when it comes to housing. And I think today we're in a really wonderful opportunity, because they were talking about the Ontario decided to create a Cutting the Red Tape to Build More Houses Act. Then that complements that Bill 185, the Build Homes Faster. It complements that, and it ultimately removes the shackles that our council has been having problems with in creating more affordable housing or more housing in general.
What are the shackles that you think councillors have?
Okay, so we're in a by-election, and they continue to say we have to fight, and we have to continue to fight against red tape. And they keep saying red tape, and that's kind of a flag for me, because I'd like to know what this red tape is. Now, the Ontario government, when they came up with this idea, they said, okay, well, we're going to remove the shackles. And one of the shackles that they keep saying, and you're going to remember this, and that was eliminating the parking minimums. And I thought this was really important because you and I have had this discussion before when we were saying along the LRT there shouldn't be any parking. There shouldn't be any parking minimums. It should be kind of open because it costs a lot of money to build parking spots because you got to dig deep, and we're talking about condos. So they said, well, we're going to get rid of that, which I thought was a brilliant idea.
So hold it, George. Who said they'd get rid of it? The province, correct?
The province had said we're going to get rid of the
but you see, the problem
parking.
that I've got with this, George, is that the councillors say that they've red tape and that they've got, and you've been saying that they're shackled, but it's their own rules. They're the ones that could get rid of the rules. It's the province that's demanding them get rid of the rules. And on Friday, the federal government actually came forward with policies that demanded that they get rid of parking minimums in transit zones. So I don't understand. You know, the councillors say that they're shackled, that they've got red tape, but they've imposed that red tape on themselves, haven't they?
Correct. So that's the best part about this. Most of the councillors, God love them, they are doing a great job, and they're trying their hardest, but they've painted themselves in a corner because of two things. One is that they know if they open up housing and housing developments in certain neighborhoods, they'll lose votes. And that's a real big problem, because half of them really, they want to continue to work in that industry in council, and I get it. So we need to kind of get rid of this idea. But
George, you know, is the reason why you elect someone just so that they can get elected again, or do you want them to show leadership and actually do what's right for the community?
And I love your question, because this is where it comes down to me. I am not worried about my political future. I'm not looking to run for a higher office. I'm running for mayor because I need to change a few things in the city of Mississauga. One of them is our housing problem. We need real leadership. We need people that are not afraid of saying no to the right people or the wrong people. And I don't have a problem saying yes to the right people for the right reason. And housing is a really, really big problem. And you know this as well as I do, that historically, when our councillors are walking around and they're knocking on doors and they're saying, you know, I want to build more affordable housing. I want to build more affordable housing. And when it comes down to brass tacks and they do their voting, they always find a reason why they can't do it. And this is what I mean by they shackle themselves. And it might be political ideology, or it might be historical ideology from previous administration. And I think it's time we need to change that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running.
How can you expect the existing council that have put those zoning rules in place on themselves and have created a structure that has hampered them, if not shackled them the way you've described? How can you expect them to change if they haven't done it already, if they haven't seen that they're wrong? And you know, it's the old thing about, you know, if you want to get out of the swamp, the first thing to realize is that you're in a swamp. And like, you know, the federal government came out with an announcement Friday that you probably took a look at. They describe almost a tragedy where the current generation of young people can't afford to have the expectation of a lifestyle comparable to what the generation before them or two generations before them, their grandparents and their parents, have enjoyed. Mainly because, according to this report, the cost of housing. Bloomberg last Monday came out with a report that said the same thing. Bloomberg said Canada was in a terrible shape, mainly because of the cost of housing. So municipal politicians have created this situation because they've done what's the expedient thing to do for their local residents, the way you described it, because they wanted to get elected again, and said they had to do it because they thought they had to do it because they didn't have backbone to stand up for what they knew was needed to be done.
And I'm not arguing with you with that. And here's the thing: it's not just a municipal problem. How can you say
they're doing a good job and that you trust them to make the changes when they haven't stood up to make those changes?
And so here's the thing: I have a suspicion that they feel obligated to vote no where they need to say yes. But I'm not sure why they've decided to go that direction. And it is indeed about leadership. And that's the reason why I'm running for mayor. It's because I have every intention to start pushing these bills to happen. This isn't just a problem inside of Mississauga. This is a nationwide problem.
But
I'm not overly concerned about
what's one of the worst cities in Ontario in regards to meeting its housing targets.
Absolutely. I totally agree with it. I totally agree with that finding, and it needs to change. And unfortunately, we don't have the council willing to step up and make it happen. Now, and that's really leadership. And I do like the people that are running. I like the councillors. They're wonderful people, and I can sit and have a beer with them. But when it comes down to something like housing, they seem reluctant to change their political ideology or their understanding of what the needs are for the people in Mississauga. And it could be because they simply don't want to lose their seat. They don't want to lose elected vote. They don't want to lose their votes. Maybe they're looking at political moving up in the political ladder. I don't have those aspirations. I think it's important for the city of Mississauga to look forward into the future and say, these are the people we need to help. And here's the thing that I think people are missing out. We need more people in the city of Mississauga to be paying their property taxes in order to keep our property taxes at a minimum, so it doesn't have to raise up. And I think people are missing that. And we can't put money into the infrastructure if we don't have the money. And we can't have the money unless you raise unless you raise
now,
property taxes.
I think this is one of the things that's been missed in the conversation in Mississauga and Toronto and elsewhere. And that is that the density of our existing suburbs has actually gone down. And people go, well, no, the houses are still there. But the problem is that what's ended up happening is people have become empty nesters, and the kids have moved out. And a house that used to have a whole family of 4 or 5 and that now has only 2 people in it. And that's closing schools. And that's challenging restaurants. And that's challenging some of our main streets. And it harms the economic situation of the city. And that's one of the reasons why the federal government, the provincial government have been talking. Actually, the provincial government hasn't, but the federal government's been talking about the ability to change as a right single family homes into a 4-plex because the missing middle is what people have described as one of the biggest problems. It's interesting. You probably know these stats, but Port Credit, most of Port Credit is around 20 to 40 units per acre.
Right.
Streetsville is comparable to that. Bloor West Village, the beaches, is that kind of density. Typical suburbia is 6 units per acre. And some of, the nicer parts of Mississauga from an income standpoint, not nicer from the higher income, I should say, not or higher cost, are 2 units per acre. Right. So half acre lots. Most people in surveys actually like living in that 20 to 40 units per acre. They like the port
Okay.
credits, the Streetsvilles, the Bluest villages, the beaches. They like that. Maybe not everywhere, but they actually like that kind of density, which is not necessarily fourplexes, but it is, laneway suites, it's granny suites, it's basement apartments, it's duplexes, it's townhomes in some cases. And again, not everywhere, but in
Yep.
some specific places, it makes sense. And, you think about my home is my castle. The reality is in our current zoning regulatory environment, my home is not my castle because all my neighbors get to tell me what I can do with it in a neighborhood meeting. And then if they complain to the ward councilor is going to tell me what I can do, and he's going to, or she's going to tell the planning department. And that's the problem that we've got, is we have got wedded to this single family home suburban lifestyle, not realize that actually our density has gone down, our schools are uneconomic, some of our stores are uneconomic, our property tax situation is uneconomic, and we are pricing our kids out of Mississauga, such that they've got to go to Georgetown or Alliston or farther afield, Belleville or not Belleville, Brantford or somewhere to be able to afford a house. And I think it's a travesty. And if you read what the federal government announced, I'm not sure about all the programs they've announced, but just their entry, they almost made it as a moral imperative that we have robbed our children of a good economic future. And it's primarily housing that's done it. And I think it's primarily at the hands of our city council and our city councilors and the red tape and regulation. We are in Canada, Toronto, Mississauga, Vancouver, Victoria, the slowest places in the Western world to get approvals. Study after study has said that.
Right. And I agree. And if you remember Brent Todderan, when he had his meeting, he mentioned that Ontario was the most difficult place to build in all of Canada. And I don't remember if you said that. It was one of the points that he made that really caught my ear, and I stuck with it. One of the neat things about this Ontario cutting the red tape to build more homes, one of them was to reduce barriers to build additional residential units. And he was talking about nanny suites. He was talking about garden suites. He was talking about converting what was unconvertible before. Now it's becoming okay to build a nanny suite in your backyard or in your garage or any of those types of things. This was an interesting idea, but it doesn't, and the fourplexes was another interesting idea. I don't think this is the silver bullet that's going to fix all of the problems in housing. I
agree. I don't think it's a silver bullet, but it is a helpful thing. And I think it is the type of development, not everywhere, that we should allow, and not everyone's going to do it. Because it does take time. And, the federal government even announced a $40,000 loan for people that wanted to do it. So they're trying to create incentives, because you got to get, some money. And not everyone has access to that kind of money. You've got to get a building permit. You've got to get a contractor. You've got to supervise the contractor. And then you got to take the risk of a year from now, after the renovation is done, am I actually going to be able to rent it and get a return? Am I going to like someone living in my basement or in the house or granny suite, lane suite, whatever. So not everyone is going to do it. And even in places in Toronto and other places where it's been allowed, Vancouver, San Francisco, Portland, etc., it's added, 10% or something of the housing need. I think the biggest issue is density, height near transit lines. Anyway, we got to take a break for some messages. We're going to come back with George, candidate for mayor of Mississauga, in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is George Tavares. He's a candidate in the current by-election for mayor of Mississauga. He ran in the election 2 years ago, about 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago, I guess, and is running again. And so you're going to have a little bit of name recognition in that area. But George, you're up against 4 current councillors. How are you going to beat 4 current councillors that have obviously got organizations in their wards, some name recognition, people, and 2 of them are, known liberals. One's a known conservative. The other one, who knows? And so, you've got people that have got existing political organizations and ward organizations. How are you gonna compete with that?
Well, it's definitely an uphill battle. A lot of word of mouth, but I don't think their name recognition and their history, it doesn't really work in their favor. For some of them, their failures are obvious and you can see them. It's documented. You can see it online. You can do a couple of Google searches and you'll see what some of their failures are. So I don't particularly think they're not all rainbows and shiny stars. They've got a couple of black marks there and a couple of X's where there should be check marks. So I'm relying heavily on social media. I do a lot of videos and I explain my platforms in full detail from one end all the way to the other. And it's really interesting because it's not platitudes. It's a lot of pass-fail criteria that I introduce, which is a little different than most of the people have been doing on their platforms and their websites. And I think it's starting to take root because a lot of the stuff that I have written and have on video has made it over to other people's platforms, and they're starting to implement my ideas onto theirs. So when they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, I really do believe this. So I must be doing something right if my competition is looking at me, a relative unknown, and copying some of my political ideologies and ideas.
What are some of the ideas that are being copied, do you think?
Okay, so we have that issue with Bloor Street. We're putting in these beautiful bike lanes on Bloor Street, which is much needed, but they're planning on removing some car lanes. Now, I don't particularly like the idea of getting rid of the car lanes. I do like having bike lanes, but the bike lanes themselves have to be protected. Now, I have a wonderful video that explains what the intention is, the technology that'll be directly available, how this will benefit the community, which was great. One of my political candidate, one of the other people that are running for mayor, has changed it and added added the pause of the bike lanes on Bloor Street. And I'm thinking, wait, that's not what I put, but it looks like it's causing a stir in the biking community. And I think that's pretty funny. So it's a little change, but it's a significant one enough to cause some problems. And the biking community now is really furious at this idea. So that's one of them.
And sorry, what are they furious about? What's the change that they're recommending?
So they've been advocating. So we're talking about the biking community. The biking community has been advocating for biking lanes, and Bloor Street was supposed to get these cycling tracks for of course cyclists, and so they've been really fighting the community in order to get this thing passed or approved. They finally got it approved, and now we have one of the candidates arguing that they want to completely freeze it or stop it to reevaluate and possibly get rid of it. And I think this is a real mistake.
So I think that bike lanes, when they are provided in sufficient quantity, in a grid, separated from cars, and maintained well, can be incredibly successful. And worldwide, there's been opposition constantly to the provision of bike lanes. But whenever cities actually provide those bike lanes, they're surprised by how many people use it, and even use it in inclement weather. Maybe not the worst snowstorms of the year, but inclement weathers. I think one of the best bike lanes that we've got is the one that is a separated trail along the Queensway. You may remember that Jim Tovey at one point in time recommended continuing that across the Credit River to the trails that are on the other side, on the west side of the Credit River. And I think that makes a ton of sense. I think you'd have some opposition from the people that are members of Credit Valley Golf Club and Mississauga Golf Club, but I don't see why it actually is a road that is a right-of-way left between those two golf clubs that goes right from where the Queensway ends on the east side of the Credit River, and you've got a potential with a hydro wire right-of-way and in
the Netherlands
on the west side, and then continuing the trail continues all the way across to Oakville. So I think that is a real potentiality. I don't like the idea of just a line of paint on the side of a road. And what it's been proven over and over again is if people think that someone can swerve into them or open a car door into them or turn right or turn left into them, people don't ride for obvious reasons. There's a big risk. And so I think we need to seriously think about a provision of enough bike lanes that are separated, completely separated from cars. We invest in them. We dedicate some property to them, some maintenance money to them, and it's got to be in enough of a grid that you can actually get around. You can get to work, or you can get to things that are going on. I live on Mississauga Road, and I got to tell you, every night, every morning, and on the weekends, particularly, there's an unbelievable amount of bikes that go up and down Mississauga Road. It's a beautiful street. It's only 2 lanes. And it was built wide enough so that the bikes can stay reasonably safe. There's only in some places, a painted lane that separates them. If you could actually build a separated lane, it would be spectacular. And that's what I think we need to do.
So it isn't just separated lanes. So I want to revolutionize cycling in the city of Mississauga. Bloor Street is a perfect place to start, because we can implement traffic calming measures there. The lights they haven't seen, we can implement technology. In the Netherlands, they introduced a new software where it'll time the lights as per the cyclists. So as the cyclists are going, it'll time the lights so that the lights will change, so that there won't be any running of the red light situations that we've been seeing in the past. And instead of the bikes being an obstacle for the drivers, they actually become an important piece of moving the traffic forward. They become an important tool to keep traffic moving. I also want to have, so the separated bike lanes, I also wanted to have LED lights with motion sensors. So as you're riding into the bike lanes, the lights will turn on. So at night, other drivers will be able to see that somebody's maybe they can't see them, but the idea is that the lights will light up as the cyclists are going, so you can identify that there is somebody on this trail, and to be just a little bit more mindful of those peoples and cyclists. And I think this could really work. And Bloor Street is the perfect place to put it, because it'll hook up to the Bloor Street in Toronto. And they've had nothing but trouble, and they really don't like them. The community doesn't like them. I know that the community had some issues with it on Bloor Street. They've changed their mind. They now see the value in it. And the cycling community doesn't believe it, but I know the people, and I've sat and talked to them. They said, we don't have a problem with the bike lanes, but they got to be good quality bike lanes, because we don't want our community to look foolish.
So de Maisonneuve in Montreal closed down, a whole lane and separated it with concrete barriers from the car traffic. And if you're there in the spring, summer, and fall, not necessarily the winter, but spring, summer, and fall, it is packed with people biking. And their answer is it took actual physical separation, because then people feel safe. And so I think that the ideas that you've got are great. No question, timing the street lights would be, the traffic signals would be fantastic. But I think the biggest thing is we got to dedicate space. And, we dedicate space for sidewalks. Why is it that we wouldn't dedicate space for bikes? And if you'd actually think about the amount of traffic that we can take out of cars and get using bikes. So I used to live in Bloris Village, and I worked at Bay and King downtown. Not all year long, but several days a week for spring, summer, and fall, I biked in. And I biked into the Martin Goodman Trail. Why did I bike into the Martin Goodman Trail? Because it was separated and it was safe. Now, I had to come up Bay Street in the middle of traffic, and I had to go down the South Kingsway in the middle of traffic. Let me tell you, those were the harrowing parts of my ride. But Martin Goodman Trail was beautiful. And I did it not every day, but fairly frequently. Anyway, you mentioned Brent Toderen and Toderen. And you and I bumped into each other at that session. Maybe you could explain to everyone what that was.
Okay, so Brent Toderen had come in, and he was explaining the next 50 years, or his perception of the next 50 years in the city of Mississauga, and how it would look like while it builds. And he's a huge fan of height, and he's a huge fan of a walkable city, and he's a huge fan of cycling, and he's a huge fan of community. And he had some really neat ideas. I don't agree with 100% of it, and I think you and I discussed that before, because he kind of glossed everything over, and I personally thought it was a little bit insulting. If I could just go back one little bit, he said that the building in Ontario was some of the most difficult in all of Canada, and then he proceeded to say, "Oh, you need to just build height. Oh, you just need to build taller and bigger, and don't worry about shadowing." And I thought that was kind of insulting to Andrew W. I won't use his last name just out of respect for him, but he was one of the planning management people in the city of Mississauga. And I kind of felt insulted for him, because he almost made it sound like, he's not putting in that much of an effort. I think that was kind of unfair. So I'm just going to put a
So,
pin in
so,
that
so
one.
let me interrupt just for a second. I apologize, but so Brent Todern, for anyone that doesn't know, was the chief planner of the city of Vancouver, and was heralded as one of the most innovative and forward-thinking chief planners in the country, and really took Vancouver forward with a lot of the downtown development, the middle missing middle that they built, but also the density that they built in False Creek and West Vancouver. And parts of Vancouver near transit stations. And Vancouver, if you've been to recently, really is quite good. He was also very involved in the whole SkyTrain transit development, which he thought was key. And so you were correct. He argued in favor of height, but he didn't say everywhere. He said near transit stations, on major arterials and near transit stations. And so I think that's one of the things that people too often get worried about when people talk about height density, that they think everything is going to turn into 20-story or 40-story towers. No, it's going to be, within a certain defined area near major transit stations. The bill that's been passed in BC, it's interesting. What it does, if you're within 400 meters of a transit station or a bus exchange where two bus routes cross, you have an as of right minimum to build 12 stories. And so they're really trying to build density around transit stations. The federal government, in their announcement on Friday of last week, talked about within 800 meters, wanting city governments to build a greater height and provide greater density, and to get rid of parking minimums. There's been a lot of rumors that the provincial government has what they call an MTSA, major transit station area, proposal that's going to similarly within 800 meters of a transit station, which would be a subway, LRT, or GO train station. Actually, not sure whether that would include GO train stations or not, but would have height. I think that is brilliant. And I think it is called for. And it's people that would move in that are my kids, that don't have cars or don't need to have cars, and would like to take transit all the time, because that's how they want to get downtown. That's how they want to get to their job. That's how they want to get to a lot of their social activities. And when they need to get a car, they'll rent one, or share one, or get an Uber or a Lyft or something like that. And I do think that point was right. I'm doing a development in Dallas, Texas right now, and it's interesting. There's not an issue with height and shadows. You know why? Because they actually want shade from the sun, and they want shade from the sun on top of schoolyards during recess times and at lunchtime, because they're really worried about the stifling heat and skin cancer. And the precedence of skin cancer, as you know, has gone berserk. And so, we have this strange obsession with shadowing. And what we end up doing is we end up approving density that is short and squat and wide, which creates a shadow for people closer to the building for a far greater length of time. When actually, if you built something that was tall, slender, and high, that's the exact same density, it would share the shadow issue with more people. It would be, from a societal standpoint, more equitable, and the shadow would be on your house for a far shorter length of time. And so we've got this strange preoccupation with wanting low, squat, wide buildings that will really affect with shadow the people that are close to you, when we could be more equitable, have far shorter, and have height. And every architect I talk to says that above 10 stories, maybe 6 stories, people don't notice height. They don't know whether it's 6, 10, or 20 stories. So the easiest way to create density is give people some extra height.
See, and here's the thing. I look at it a little bit differently, and I'll tell you why. I live currently in a condo that's 12 stories, one of the earlier condos in the city of Mississauga. And although it was built when concrete was cheap, land was cheaper, and gas was plentiful, and it's not true anymore. But here's the problem with having a smaller 12-story building, is that once everything starts to increase in price, we have 144 different units that have to share the price of everything. As everything goes higher in price, everybody's condo fees start to go up, and it's only shared by 144. Now we're paying $1,000. Some of us are paying $1,200 a month for condo fees. Now, if we were 24 stories, we're talking about halving that, maybe 3/4 or up to half, depending on how you have it all set up. But we actually start making it less, we start making it more affordable. So the lower the the stories, the less affordable they become in the long run. So we can't just continue to look at it as we short and then you've got a shadow issue. In the long run, it's going to cost the people that live there a lot more money, and they have to start making some difficult decisions. Now, all this considered, put a pin in that thing. We'll talk about it a little bit later. The reality of it is we need somebody that's going to come in and say, enough. We are in a housing crisis. In the next 12 years, we have to make difficult decisions. And some of those decisions are, I'm really sorry that you don't like the height it's going up. That person needs to come up. That person, I think, is me. And I have no issues if they say, George, we're not voting for you. I can afford to lose some of those votes. If I become mayor today and I lose it in 2 years from now because of decisions that I make, I'm okay with that, provided we start getting the housing that we need. And I have a sneaking suspicion the biggest concern the people of Mississauga have is they want a safe place to eat, sleep, drink, and they want to be left alone. And the second we explain to them, additional housing will not interrupt your ability or quality of living. Lack of housing, lack of building will. And until they start to appreciate that, then they'll never appreciate the importance of having those homes built.
Well, I think that, stymieing development, stymieing the building of housing will mean our taxes will go up. Our property taxes will be higher. I think we'll have less interesting restaurants and attractive stores. We'll be challenged to keep all of our schools open. We will have less libraries. We'll have less economic benefits for society by definition. And more importantly, while we may enjoy, if you've already bought a house, higher net worth, because the house price is inflated. Number one, it's paper profit that isn't real, because the reality is if you ever move out into something else, you're going to still be paying an overinflated price for what you move into. So it's really, it's an illusionary, wealth that you've created. And worse, the people in our society that can afford it least, you've robbed of a good future. Our children, renters that want to become homeowners, and the newcomers to our society. They can't afford to get in. We've created this situation where we've robbed. It's an intergenerational inequity. I interviewed a guy from Vancouver that runs a intergenerational equity, and he says this is the first generation in history that is passing on to the next generation a worse economic future, not a better economic future. And it's housing prices, debt and deficit, and lack of repair of infrastructure. Anyway, we got to take another break and come back with George Tavares, candidate for mayor of Mississauga in the by-election that's happening on June 10th in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone. Great conversation, George. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. George Tavares is my guest tonight. He's a candidate for the mayor of Mississauga in the upcoming mayoralty by-election in Mississauga. George is one of the candidates that is not a current councillor on the city of Mississauga. And so I thought it'd be really helpful to give him a little bit of extra exposure. And I'm trying to challenge him on some of the issues. And we're doing well in chatting together. I've run into George at a couple different events. I've interviewed him before. I found him to be a very thoughtful, smart, knowledgeable gentleman. George, crime is up fairly dramatically. We've had gunshots in Port Credit. We've had burglaries. We've had car theft. What do you think about what the current council is recommending in regards to that? And what are your thoughts on what's happened in our community with all this extra crime?
All right. So great question. And it's a frightening part of the campaign. There's two things that I dislike. One of them is the way that we report crime is a little bit strange. And if you go online, there's a Peel Regional crime reporting where you can type in a couple of bits and pieces and you can find out what kind of crime's happening in your neighborhood. One of the things that bugs me is whenever there's crime with gun-related crime where there's not a victim. So if they hear gunfire, they label it as mischief. And if you Google mischief and you look at that, it says we've had something like 10,000 cases of mischief. I don't know how much of that was gun-related or what was mischief as in spray painting or graffiti, but we need to change that to identify kind of where the real problems are. So that's one of the problems that I have with crime. There is a huge problem, obviously, with cars being stolen in the city of Mississauga. Now we've come up with a Peel Regional Police Force, a task force that's yielding some good results in the past couple of weeks. But one of my mayoral candidates has basically put together an idea where they want to put a snitch line together, where if you can identify somebody that maybe or may not be involved in some criminal activity, crime with car theft specifically, then if that person gets tried and charged, charged and tried, they get $10,000. And I was really upset with that idea.
Snitch line?
Sorry, the snitch line.
Snitch line?
It's a different. They don't call it a snitch line. I'm calling it a snitch line for lack of a better word. And
when we were off air, you described it as something akin to.
So I call it the Salem witch hunt. It was the equivalent of the Salem witch hunt or the MacArthur era communist, report your communist people. And I said this was a really bad idea because it ultimately starts to destroy communities, and it starts to pit people against people. And unfortunately, when you start doing this archaic idea of pointing at somebody and declaring them something without a fair trial, communities start to recognize those people as bad, even though they might not be. And I thought this was a really, really bad idea. So I was a little insulted by this idea, and I really wanted to.
I agree with you. I think it's a terrible idea. So number one, from what I understand, the vast majority of these car thefts are shipped to Montreal and are loaded in cargo ships and are shipped across seas in like no time flat. And I met with a city councillor in Toronto who said the number one most beneficial thing we could do is close the city of Montreal to shipping of used cars. Why do we have to have used cars shipped from the port of Montreal? I think that is a brilliant idea. So I think that's number one. Number two thing that this individual said, and I checked out with a couple of different people, and I think he's right, is he said if you're charged with car theft, you're granted bail that day, and you're out on the street and do it again. And I think the biggest disincentive, the biggest discipline to any kind of crime is spending time in jail. And I think that car theft should be a mandatory one day at least, if not a couple of days in jail. You should not be granted bail right away. And I think that is key. And then he also said what happens is a lot of the people that are coming in on a visa and are leaving again so that they don't end up getting tracked down. And if they're caught and they are on a visa, they get deported. They don't care if they're deported because they actually were going to leave in a couple of months anyway. So again, I think that we've got to have a way of having a detriment, a discipline, and I think the best is some time in jail. And if we don't have enough jails, that's a different issue. If we have a criminal justice system that works too slow, that's another issue that we've got to address. I think burglaries, home invasions. And, I've seen and heard of, people that are just banging down front doors, going in the front, grabbing the fob out of the front hallway and then stealing the car. And we just can't have this in our community. And so I think part of it is we don't have enough community police. I'm not sure exactly where they are. I've been burglarized myself personally twice in the last 6 months. The first time because they thought that there might be people in the house, police were there very promptly. The second time took them half a day to show up. They're shrugging their shoulders. There's almost nothing they can do. So I think that it's a real issue. The fact that people think they can use guns in Port Credit at bars and restaurants, something's wrong with our society. And we've got to make some changes in that regard. And I think that it's got to be greater police presence. And the reality is the mayor and another council person sit on Peel Regional Police. The provincial government has some nominees as well. Peel Police are the responsibility, not completely, but the responsibility of council and the mayor. I think we got to get tougher. We have just got to get tougher on crime.
Agreed. And here's the thing: it's called the criminal justice system, not the victim justice system. So that's the very first thing we need to do is we need to identify who needs to go, who's the victim here. and it's not the criminals. It's definitely it should be victim justice system. So that's the first thing. The other thing that I wanted to, and this is a real big issue. We're putting a lot of money into the police budget, and don't get me wrong, I think it's needed and it's important, and I really do appreciate the law enforcement officers in our region of Peel. But I was trying to come up with a new idea, and I came up with this one, and it's a little heavy-handed. And the idea was a performance-based budgetary increase. So it's based on, if you could lower crime by, let's say, 20% in the first year, then we can justify the budget, and they can use it for whatever they want to use it for. If they want to use it for policing, for pay increases, if they want to buy better equipment, it's theirs to do it. But if they can't do it, then the budget is significantly decreased. And the idea now is that we remove some of the onus on the counselors, and we say to the law enforcement officers, listen, I want you to do your job. I know you want to do your job. But more importantly, it gives them a chance and a sense of responsibility, a better responsibility to say, I want to give this a try. I don't think it's going to be a very a popular idea to our law enforcement officers, but I think a few of them will gravitate towards this idea and take it as a real challenge. What do you think?
What other things are you running on? What are your other big policies?
So I would like to change a little bit of the criminal justice. Now, this is a federal problem with the criminal justice system, but we have a lot of problem with our trash, and I have no problems with the idea we get the anybody that was caught stealing cars, breaking and entering, any of that stuff. We need to pick up some of the trash. I have no problems with the remember the chain gangs of criminals that would clean up the side of the roads and that sort of thing. You've seen this in the United States. I love the idea. I'd love to make that happen, get them out there to do some work, get some physical activity into them, and they get a little bit of exposure to see what kind of things are going on in the world. And they've got to pick up some trash. So they created trash. We're going to pick up some of the trash. So that was another one I'd really, really like to do. We have a little bit of a problem. I'll give you a little bit of context. I worked with a small company that designed bomb detectors and narcotic detectors for airport securities and for prisons. And we're a little too comfortable with giving minors or youth day passes. I'll give you, let me explain it. If somebody has gotten a 3-month sentence, they can do 4 weekends at a youth detention center, and we call it the camp, and they go in there and they do a Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday release, and that qualifies as a week of their sentence. So instead of doing the full 30 days, they're only doing 4 weekends. And I'd like to see if we can change that entirely. The structure is there for the entire time. I can't understand why we weren't just putting them in for the full 30 days. So I'd like
I think part of the problem, I've talked to several people that have been critical of the criminal justice system, is that it ends up being a university in crime, because you're there in jail with other criminals, and you end up talking a lot and learning a lot about, how to not get caught again. And that is wrong. I think that there should be incentives for good behavior. I think there should be incentives for going on some of these, whether it be the work programs that you're talking about, or maybe it's education, and somehow bettering themselves. And, I think that there should be ways that you can reduce your sentence by doing positive things for yourself or the community, such that people want to not reoffend. Because I think that the percentage of people in the criminal justice system that reoffend is atrocious. And so I do think there's a problem with the criminal justice system in that regard. That said, if people deserve to go to jail, they deserve to go to jail, and they should go to jail. And I think we need that detriment in our society. Okay, what else? What other things are you running on?
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the BRT, the bus rapid transit that they're planning on doing on Dundas. They're considering it in 2026. I'm sure that'll be pushed back. But I think there's a missing link behind all of this. So we bought a traffic management system in 2016. I'm not sure if you remember this. And inside of the traffic management system, there was a bus management system where they put these transponders on the buses. Are you familiar with this? So if you go on the My Way bus link, you can see where the buses are, whether they're late, whether they're on time, that sort of thing. I think something that they originally thought up, but they didn't implement, was the ability to link the transponders on the bus with the traffic management systems. And if they did it properly, then we can actually have the buses time the lights. Remember when I told you earlier about the biking timing the lights? We can do the same thing with the bus transponders to time the lights to create a virtual bus transit system. And the thing is, if we do this properly on Dundas, now I'm looking at as a pilot project between Mavis and Cawthra, because that's a very small area, 2 lanes with each direction. If we do this properly and we can get the bus system to work in that direction and east-west, then we can probably do all of the bus systems, again, 16 kilometers at a time. We can manage to do that. And then once we get that corrected and working well, we can then use the loop sensors, we can use the cameras to manage all of the traffic inside of the city of Mississauga, so we can manage it properly. And here's the thing, they intended to do this back in 2019. I've got slide presentations and video presentations with a few people, and they were saying, touted this stuff as like the breakthrough. And here was the thing, I saw it work in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I was in love with this. So I thought, this is great. Mississauga's got the same thing. They never implemented this. They have all of our lights are timed, either 2 minutes and 5, 2 minutes and 15, 2 minutes and 30 seconds, regardless of how much traffic there was. And I always thought this was a bit strange. So when I was looking through some of the information, I found this and I thought, man, I can't wait to put this on the table and make it happen. Now, this is just one project. And if you watch my videos, there's one that I talk about the problem between the napkin idea and the finished project. And the napkin idea is, you and I were having a beer, we're talking, and I'm writing down, and I create an idea on a napkin, and we look at it, and you say, this is a great idea. And then we bring it to council, and council says, let's make it happen. And unfortunately, after going through all of the regulatory processes, and they start stripping a little bit off of here, we're going to remove this because it's going to cost too much money, we're going to change this because it's going to, not going to work. The finished product doesn't even look like the napkin idea. And then you wind up having a failed project. And because the councillors were part of the process of elimination, they still say, yeah, that was exactly what we intended. And I think it's important to look back at all of the projects that we had in the city of Mississauga and look at those opportunities, the missed opportunities, and when the ones that we've scrubbed off, put them back on the board. Because if they had real merit, like this one has real merit, we need to really reintroduce this and make it work. And it's not like we're going to be breaking any new ground. And it's not like we have to change any infrastructure because the infrastructure there, this becomes seamless. And the technology will work, and it'll work in our favor.
Well, timed traffic management systems just make a ton of sense. So I agree with you completely in that regard. We should have timed traffic management systems. And if we don't, I'm shocked that we don't. I think the issue on Dundas is that we have been talking for 25, probably more years about all-day two-way go on the Milton-Mississauga line. And the federal government's supposedly committed, billions of dollars or $500 million or something like that. The provincial government has done the same, and we still haven't done it. And the reason why is because CP is demanding, as a private enterprise, has every right to, money for the right to use their lanes. We had a derailment on the CP line at Mavis of hazardous goods. We had the largest peacetime evacuation in 1978, I think it was. Dangerous goods should not be traveling through the city of Mississauga and the city of Toronto. And we should be doing whatever it takes to get the dangerous goods out. Lake Megantic got the federal government to move dangerous goods out of Lake Megantic. Calgary got the federal government to move dangerous goods out of Calgary, both where there were disasters. How come we've had this evacuation in Mississauga and we have not taken the dangerous goods out? We took the CN goods off the lakeshore line, moved it to north of Highway 7, Highway 407. There is an opportunity to do that with CP. It costs money, but it's the right thing. And if we did it, we'd open up that Mississauga-Milton line. If we opened up that Mississauga-Milton line, it goes across Dundas, the same distance that you talked about, not all Dundas, but from Mavis all the way to the Etobicoke border. And it's effectively, therefore, an above-ground subway system.
Agreed.
And I think if you did a study on Dundas, you would find that the vast majority of people that take a bus and would take a BRT would be going to the Kipling GO or subway station. They're not necessarily not. Some of them are going to go a couple of stops, but a lot of them are going to the subway. And so therefore, if we can connect to the subway, or even better to Union Station with the GO train, I think that's what we want. So my proposal would be that what we really need is to take the GO train, make it all day two-way frequent,
Sure.
and potentially add a stop at Cawthra, because it actually crosses Dundas right at Cawthra. And if you had a stop at Dixie, at Cawthra, at Huron, Ontario, at Mavis, you've got a subway.
Yep.
You've got service as good as the subway on Yonge Street, and and that gets you to downtown, to Union Station, or it gets you to the Kipling GO. And then what we should also do, that currently it doesn't stop at Bloor Dundas, it should stop at Bloor Dundas, so you should get on the UP Express to get to the airport. And I think that's the solution to Dundas. And I bet you if we actually did that, the need for a BRT would go down dramatically. We may not need the BRT. And I tell you, a lot of people are not going to take a BRT from Cawthra or from Mavis and have it stop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and then get on the GO train to go downtown, or the subway to go downtown. It's too long. You know, the most successful subway in North America is the 7th Avenue subway in New York. And the secret is it's got an express and a local. Yeah. And you would never take the local the whole way from Harlem to Wall Street, but you would take the express. You'd get on the local, transfer the express, and take the express. And it's the same thing. No one is going to take a BRT from Mavis to the Kipling subway and then take a subway all the way to King and Bay. Not going to happen.
Yeah, you and I we're talking the same language. But there's a real problem. There's a real problem with this, because we have such lack of transit available options, and we're using, and I've said this before, 2 years ago, I said we were using a playbook that was 20 years old 20 years ago, and that playbook was everything. It was our understanding of transit, our understanding of housing, our understanding of technology. All of that has changed. We have so much available infrastructure, so much available technology, and there's so much more education regarding smart city design. We're not using it properly. We need to really reevaluate, and I'm talking put everything on the table. And here's the thing that I think your proposal.
I don't think we need to put everything on the table. I think we need to have. We've been talking about all day two-way GO for a long time.
Put it on the table.
All way two-way frequent GO train service on the Mississauga Milton line, and maybe add an extra stop.
But I have a problem with one of the issues, and you said a proposal. I think a proposal without any type of financial incentives or failure to fulfill the obligations. So whatever we've heard about this two-way GO from Milton for decades, and they keep bringing it up, and they keep throwing it, like dangling it in front of us like a carrot. I think we should really have some sort of an incentive that if they fail to do so, there should be some financial obligations to it, so that if they can't do it, they have to pay up.
No, I think you need to elect a mayor that's got the political gravitas and is willing to stake their political capital on demanding the federal government, the provincial government come to the table and get it done. We've been talking about it for too long. You know, the places to glow and the big move both analyzed this and said it had an 8-to-1 benefit to cost ratio. It was the most beneficial transit improvement in all of the GTA. Anyway, we got to take a final break for some messages, and we'll be back in 2 minutes with some concluding comments with George Tavares, candidate for mayor in the upcoming Mississauga mayor by-election. Stay with us, everybody. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm having a lot of fun debating with George Tavares tonight. He's a candidate for mayor in the by-election that's happening on June 10th in Mississauga for a new mayor. I've had the opportunity to chat with George before and at a few different events that we've run into each other. And he's a smart guy, and he's got some good ideas. So I recommend you check him out. George, I got to ask you, you aren't a current councillor. 4 of the councillors are running. One has resigned her seat, such that if she's victorious, the by-election for her ward is going to happen at the same time. The other 3 have not resigned their seats. So if they're victorious, we'll actually end up having to have a by-election, or undemocratically, they'll appoint someone for, 2 years, half of a term. And if we have a by-election, it's going to be another couple $100,000 or $1 million to have a by-election. if they were running in a general municipal election, it would
Right.
be illegal for them to run for two spots. They could not run for council and mayor at the same time.
Correct.
And the rules also say if they're a member of provincial parliament or a member of federal parliament, they have to resign the day that nominations close.
Right.
So you can't have, according to our legislation, another political post on a general election or
Yes.
anytime if you're in another level of government.
Right.
Do you think they should be allowed to run, these councillors?
Now, this is the part that usually gets a lot of people upset. My position is this. I don't have a problem with them not stepping down in this by-election because we would have lost 4 talented people on the city council, and that's a lot of talent that we would have to find again. And that would be a real problem in the city of Mississauga. Not just the financials. We're talking about the talent, the understanding of the understanding to navigate through the city hall, all of the political issues. These are all talents, and there is no YouTube
But George,
video.
let me interrupt you. If it's 2 years from now, if all 4 of them want to run,
right?
they have to. They're not going to run. They can't run for their council seat. So that's the way our laws work. Is that if they want to run for mayor, they can't run for council. You can't have two kicks at the can. You're only allowed 1 kick at the can. So why are they allowed now? And similarly, Mitzi Hunter ran for mayor of Toronto.
Yes.
The rules are in a by-election, she had to resign her position as MPP. So if you had to resign your position as MP, think about Charles Sousa. I think Charles Sousa might have made a great mayor, great mayoralty candidate. The rules are he would have to resign. The risk for him is a lot more than the risk is for these 3 councillors that didn't resign. I think it is wrong. They should have resigned.
Yep. You and I are going to argue different about it because I really think that we can't afford to lose that much talent in such a short period of time.
But George, we would if they ran in a regular election.
Correct. But they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it because they would know they would.
Oh, so what you're saying is when the risk is a little bit higher, they'd actually think before they put their hand. That's exactly my point. They're running because there's no risk, and that's wrong. There should be risk when you run. And the one candidate that's resigning, I think, is doing the ethical thing, the right thing, and I frankly think the legal thing. And I bet you sometime in the future, the provincial government's going to see the mistake of this and say it doesn't make any logical sense. They can't do it in a general election. An MP can't do it. An MPP can't do it. So why the heck should a city councilor be able to do it? It is wrong. Anyway, we'll disagree on that one. That's our show for tonight, everybody. George, if people want to check you out, do you have a website they should go to?
Yeah, I'm at Tavares Check it out. Lots of videos, lots of information.
George, appreciate you joining me. Thanks for the discussion. It was great.
Thanks, Brian.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. I thank you for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos go up on my website the minute that my shows go to air, and you can get them also on social media from a video standpoint and on all those different podcast servers from a podcast standpoint. Thanks. Good night. Good night, George.